thank you all for coming today. I would also, before I get started, thank Deanna and all others who are involved in bringing me here, inviting me for the talk. So today's presentation will be based on a short essay published in the Journal of the Center. So I would also like to thank Dr. Danny Roy and for his very helpful editorship. So my topic today is the shifting landscapes of AI in China and the US. We all know that AI, sorry, I need to time a little bit so that it won't go over too much. We all know this is a very fast developing area. So I would say it's very much a moving target. And for this reason, I feel reluctant to claim expertise on this topic. So instead, my goal is to share some observations at the current stage and get your feedbacks and get what you think on this topic. So my interest on this topic started with this event. Since the audience all came for this talk, for this topic, I assume that many of us have heard about it. So early this year, 2025, DeepSeek, a previously little-known Chinese company, debuted a powerful open source large language model named R1. And the model performed at a similar level as the leading AI machine models in the US, but only with a fraction of their costs. So how they did it? So they did it with optimized engineering architecture and advanced reasoning techniques. I have to admit, I'm not able to explain how they did it technically beyond this, but fortunately, they did it. They explained in some detail how they did it in an article published in a September issue of Nature. So those of us who are interested in the topic could check it out. Okay. But I do like to I do like to dwell on one technical aspect, that is open source or open weight approach to AI. Conventionally, open source refers to software that has publicly available source code. This openness allows users, developers, researchers to inspect, modify, and build upon the model. So it's very much a community-based development model. But in the era of AI, it has become more complex than this. This openness takes place now at multiple levels, including software, training data, model architecture, parameters, as well as other resources implicated in knowledge production, if we can call it. So this means it implicates more issues, including privacy, because large amount of data involved, or intellectual properties, who own this data, public security, obviously, innovation, incentive to innovate, and sometimes versus at the expense of public interest or for public interest, all these issues. So all these issues, sometimes fundamental issues as what's considered open source, benefiting the whole community, or how we achieve that, are being debated among researchers, investors, industries, lawyers, and public policymakers. So here on the screen, I present you the two camps, two opposing camps. Each camp has its own list of prominent Turing Award laureates from the computer science field and high-profile investors, venture capitalists, and so on and so forth. So it's very much still a developing issue. Okay. So, but appearance or the release of OpenAI, not OpenAI, DeepSeek's models still created more than a bit shock in both the tech world and also the business community. I have to move this. Um, Many people considered it a challenge to Silicon Valley's AI scaling paradigm, and then an associated business model on its basis. So meaning sending shockwaves through the U.S. stock market, and it ended up fueling concerns over America's AI leadership in this tech rivalry with China. So the rest of the talk would be my brief discussion of DeepSeek's technological and market impact. And then we use it as a lens to contrast China's emerging AI development strategy with that of the US. So that's the goal. Okay, so since the release of OpenAI, if you remember that, OpenAI's ChatGPT in 2022, Silicon Valley has spent mountains of money in pursuit of AI's holy grail, a artificial generative intelligence, AGI. So scaling law is a means to achieve that. They firmly believe that. So it is a strategy of continuously scaling up the pre-training of their large language models. Pre-training refers to the phase where AI models learn large language learn from vast, large amounts of unrelated data, language patterns. They tease out patterns from those data. And this process requires large amount of computational resources. So the linear chain is like more resources would lead to large models, which would in turn lead us to AGI. But recently, this model has begun to plateau. The reason behind it are multifaceted, but including limited data availability. We're simply running out of data and soaring computational energy cost. I don't know if you read about this, but it costs a lot of energy, long story short, and also diminished returns from model size. So the larger models don't necessarily lead to more intelligent result. So for instance, OpenAI's latest models, ChatGPT number 5, version 5, are estimated, because they never tell us directly, estimated to cost well over 100 million each. But the industry was a bit disappointed given the high price tag. They think that latest models are only incremental improvements instead of the breakthroughs people were expecting. So in their pursuit of AGI, Wall Street's leading AI companies have thrived on the assumption that only a few of tech giants possess the capital and computing power needed to develop and scale cutting edge AI technology. So that's their business model. But DeepSeek's cost-efficient open source or open weight alternatives have cast doubt on this, on the sustainability of this AI paradigm and the business model. So potentially challenging investor confidence. So I don't know if you read it in the news. Just days after DeepSeek's release, its latest model, US tech stocks plunged. The worst happened to NVIDIA. I think we probably have heard of this company. It's a company that provides the chips for powering AI model. So, of course, the stock market recovered soon after, but the broader concerns do remain. So while AGI holds immense potential, the government it paints a very rosy future. The industry remains in the early stages. Only a few sectors, including like coding or customer services, are showing tangible returns, while the broader transformative impact may still be years away. So, and that has led to growing concerns about whether AI's current trajectory will lead to sustainable growth or another speculative cycle, like the dot-com bubble in the late 1990s. So, so DeepSeek's success, on the other hand, highlights this potential of open source AI as an alternative to this expensive proprietary system that in the US. Its success, if we can call it a success, has reinforced the Chinese AI industry's growing alignment with the open source development model. So major Chinese tech forms such as Alibaba, Tencent, Baidu, they're all major players in this following this model. AI large language models such as Alibaba's Qianwen family, they have a family of like 8 to 10 different models. And they rank among the most capable and widely downloaded, used open source AI systems. And the industry observers also argue that this emerging open source model is more conducive to affordability and accessibility because they're free and for broader industry and faster industry adoption and innovation. So in addition, Wall Street Journal claimed that China's tech industry is strongly oriented towards applications, probably for the above mentioned reasons. They are keen to develop low-cost tools that boost China's efficiency and can be marketed easily. For instance, tools used for grading high school entrance exams, improving weather forecasts, dispatch police, and advising farmers on crop rotation, so on and so forth. And then a data that I got earlier today from Alibaba's leadership is that a survey number estimated that early this year, last year, the number of enterprises and businesses who used some elements of AI is only 8%. But now this number has reached 50%. So you can see the fast diffusion of AI devices and technologies in China. So there's like emerging, there's observations that China has this emerging way that's different than the United States when it comes to AI development. But among all these talks about a unique Chinese model, the role of the state is featured significantly. And the Chinese state has played multiple roles, ranging from strategic planning, regulatory frameworks, to funding public investment and industrial subsidies. So I list some examples. So AI has been featured in all these national level economic plans and initiatives and programs. For instance, in the 12th five-year plan, the 14th five-year plan, and more recently, Digital China Project, and more specifically, New Generation AI Development Plan, and just a few weeks ago, AI Plus initiative, aiming for integration of AI across all sectors. And in terms of funding, one good example would be National Integrated Circus Industry Investment Fund, quite mouthful, but usually it's called the Big Fund. And then more recently, the state also issued an investment fund focused on supporting startups. As you can see, state plays a very significant role in this AI development in China. But the state involvement in tech development is not unique to China. Historically, many governments or government support has played a crucial role in many countries. For instance, in the rise of major semiconductor powerhouses, such as Japan, Taiwan, South Korea, including the US. And so today, as the geopolitical tension continues to rise, both China and the US are expanding state influence over AI development. In the US, for instance, we have the CHIPS and Science Act in the Biden administration, but no longer there. But the Trump administration has its own version of state intervention in AI development. So in addition to this, by the way, in addition to these national level plans and programs, initiatives, directives, at a local level, local governments, like both the provincial level and the city level, and they all have rolled out their own funding programs and projects because they want to take the opportunity, take advantage of the opportunity to develop AI-driven economies. So this is the situation. But contrary to the common view that China's tech development is primarily driven by the state with a weak private sector, the country's AI strategy actually increasingly center on leveraging state support to enable market-driven innovation. I listed some examples. The private sector has already become the backbone of technological innovation. For instance, the data show that almost 78% of China's patents that come from the private sector. They also lead in their R&D investment and also result outcomes. And then another piece of telling data is almost like by the third quarter of 2024, among the 375 some unicorn companies. Unicorn refers to a company with a market evaluation of at least a billion. So among all these unicorn companies, startups, only a small fraction of them were state-owned or state-related. So in addition, Chinese policymakers have been striving to improve foundational institutions, foundational economic institutions, social economic institutions, including encouraging freer flow of key production factors such as talents and data, also standardize the market access, fair competition in intellectual property protection. So the goal is to create a market-oriented and open environment that supports sustained entrepreneurial innovation. So just like the economist noted, that in addition to all this, the government, there's also this government-enabled innovation chain where government officials they help identify ideas developed in state-run labs and universities and help them set up companies and turn them into commercial products, and often with local development zones, the local government, the governments help set up. And So in other words, they serve as pretty much an interface between labs, universities, and private sector. Governments even establish marketplaces where companies can bid directly on their patents, and they also invest in private companies and help build supply chains around them. So these oftentimes local governments, they play this dual role. They're like part of a political organ, but also they're in charge of developing local digital economy. So infrastructures are also part of this China model, very unique in China. The infrastructures include not only the data centers where computers, servers, and chips generating computer power. It also includes, of course, telecom networks to transmit the data, and power grid, the energy source, and land on which these data centers are built. So we already know, I know we have a lot of China experts in here, like telecom networks and power grid and land in China are already state-owned and state-managed. But when it comes to data centers, the governments also play a huge role. So overall, China has the world's largest, the second largest computing power. Second, of course, to the U.S., but they're very close in terms of the amount of computing power, very comparable. So as of August 2024, there are about 300 AI computing center projects. That is in addition to those standard computing centers, and these centers are geared towards AI capacities. So local governments led on 34% of them. Of course, oftentimes governments build data centers in collaboration with the private sector. And then state-owned telecoms operators, they own or manage another almost 20%. But the private sector also plays a huge role. They're mostly internet companies, tech companies like Alibaba, and cloud computing vendors. And they led on almost 18%. But they have an advantage in terms of their technological capacities. So their centers are oftentimes larger, with clusters over 10K chips or GPUs, and they're more technologically advanced. So although there are many, I should speed out a little bit. They're large in number, but there are like also trends of fragmentation because the local government are competing against each other, and so leading to overcapacity, low utilization, inefficiency. So what does the Chinese government do? In response, they did what they're good at. So they organized this East Data West Computing project, and a year later, the National Computing Power Network project. And so basically, is to construct 8 national computing hubs and 10 data center clusters, and no new large or super large data centers are allowed to be constructed outside these clusters and hubs. And then these hubs and clusters oftentimes situated in inland region with rich renewable energy. And then, of course, they're connected with the upgraded high-speed networks. So the goal is to optimize resource utilization efficiency, increase green energy supports, balance their geographical distribution, which is currently clustered in saturated coastal area. So in contrast, in the U.S., these infrastructures, including from data centers to data transmitting networks, it's all privately driven, and then they have been like invested a huge amount of money in it. So here's some data. Investment in AI related infrastructures has grown by 23%. far outpacing the average growth in GDP. And AI-related capital expenditure have contributed more to the U.S. economy than all consumer spending. And as a percentage of US GDP, AI infrastructure investment already surpassed the peak of the telecom boom. That is the the bubble of .com. So in terms of financing, another piece of this model, the state has increasingly played a greater role in directing innovation, private venture capital investment has, I quote, collapsed from those business media, falling by 50% year on year in the first half of 2025. And the value of China's venture capital and private equity investments was only 8% of that in the US. There are many factors behind this drop. For instance, since the state has been playing a bigger role, investment decisions these days are less driven by private risk appetite and more by policy goals. So less risk takers, and there is not much room even for risk taking. And then there are harder IPOs, meaning that less exit strategies. And then there, on a broader level, China experiencing an economic slowdown. And the last one, we all know that geopolitical tensions play a huge role. A lot of overseas capital, private capital is afraid to invest in China. So in contrast, and this is only one feature in this financing in the US. I mean, of course, financing is all through private market. And leading companies, there's an alarming phenomenon. Leading companies are simultaneously playing multiple roles. By leading companies, NVIDIA would be a good example. That recently they announced this like 100 billion, like 100 billion investment with OpenAI. OpenAI, by the way, is NVIDIA's customer because OpenAI has to buy, relies on NVIDIA's chips. But now NVIDIA, by investing in them, and they're actually lending their customers money to buy more chips that they produce. In other words, they are playing multiple roles. Leading companies like NVIDIA playing multiple roles as investors, customers, and suppliers, creating this closed loop of internal capital flows, which is good for these companies involved because it drives revenue growth, boosts market evaluations, and facilitating financing, and so on and so forth. But it drives the AI industry further away from the real economy and towards a more financialized form. And in addition, this related party, they're seemingly independent, but they're all related, that this will weaken the independence of all parties involved, therefore leading to increasing systemic risk. Okay, so now maybe many audience would ask me, so you compared a little bit two different models. So who is winning in the future? I don't think I'm in a position to say that, but I can offer I can only gathering clues to think along. One of these in the form of this recent book by political scientist Jeffrey Ding on technology and the rise of great powers. His main argument is that the true determinant of long-term economic power is not who innovates first, but who integrates and scales technology across industries. And so he argued that this pattern holds across past industrial revolution. So I also argue that this is not just the past industrial revolutions, but also evident in China's economic development today. So because China is not yet a global leader in fundamental research breakthroughs, for instance, the country still lags behind the US and in many other Western countries in many areas, but this has not prevented China from achieving global industrial competitiveness. So as evidence in sectors such as electronic vehicle, industrial robots, smartphone appliances, and so on and so forth. So he argues that, like Jeffrey Dean argues, that the success stems from a highly adaptive ecosystem of companies that excel at applying and scaling technology, creating dynamic environments for technological innovation. Similarly, Dan Wang and his colleague, Dan Wang has a new book out too. He argues that the China model features not only industry policies, infrastructure support, but also innovation system made of a huge amount of large number of well-trained workforce, engineers, computer scientists, and their know-how, including innovative entrepreneurs. And this system can scale up new tech fast. So his last words would be suggestion for American policymakers, saying that it's not effective simply trying to slow down China by imposing those export controls and tariffs. Instead, the government must focus on building up its own systems of industrial strengths by making long-term patient investments, not just in these key select industries, but in all these infrastructure, important sectors, energy, information, transportation, infrastructure. So I'll end on this note. Thank you all again for your interest. I hope I didn't go over time too much.
Well, thank you so much, Elaine. That was really fascinating. And these are themes that we have addressed many times at the China seminar over the last 10 years, certainly. By the way, if you have questions, please use the chat function, and I'll try to moderate them and combine them as best as possible. I have a couple of questions. The main one is, how do Chinese AI companies make money?
Right.
I mean, that seems to be, I mean, profit is eventually required somewhere, isn't it?
Right. For instance, let's have DeepSeek as an example, and also Alibaba, because Alibaba, I know Alibaba because I'm working on a book project on Alibaba as an example of China's digital economy. So they make money by selling their cloud computing services. So not unlike, so I emphasize the differences, but oftentimes the two countries also share quite a bit of similarities. So Alibaba, I think it's more than Amazon, because Amazon doesn't have its own AI models, but Alibaba has its own AI models. So Amazon has AWS, Amazon Web Services, which is a cloud computing service. So they sell computing power to all those customers and businesses who need to train their own data, train their own models, or who want to deploy models and so on and so forth. So Alibaba provide their open source AI models for free, but at the same time, because to use these models, you have to have computing power. So they sell their computing power.
Right.
So actually, their cloud computing business has seen a huge increase that boosted by this excitement around DeepSeek. And DeepSeek, on the other hand, I think it's you have to be two types of products. For customers, it's free, but for it's open source. But for businesses, sometimes they build services around tailored for these companies.
Right.
But you're right that the open source model also make people wonder how they make money. But the same is true with those proprietary, some reason I have problem pronouncing it, proprietary models, because they're not making enough money compared to the investment they have put in.
Yeah. Although they would argue that, that's the the beginning. So, but I mean, there is at least
Right.
so Beverly Burden has asked a similar question. How quickly is China converting its massive AI infrastructure supplied by hyperscalers like Alibaba and the data analysis provided by the state think tanks at national, local, and provincial level into policy and strategic advantages for China relative to the US model of AI use?
How quickly or
Yeah,
how
yeah. Or how
how
effectively?
quickly? I
Yeah.
mean, like people, for instance, think tanks and researchers and in the US, they are so worried that the open source models of China would get like faster
Hmm.
diffusion and adoption across the world. Um, that's what they, of course, that would be the hope for many people, but I haven't seen many data that, for instance, I do see, I do, I've heard news that DeepSeek is being scrutinized in, for instance, Europe, uh, in the US allies. So this
Hmm.
political tension,
Hmm.
uh,
Yeah. I mean,
fight political
there
tension,
are,
like
right. I mean, there are the US government, the different departments, different states have banned the use of DeepSeek and on the, the
right,
government-owned
right,
computers and that sort of thing.
quoting national security
Right,
or privacy issues and so on and so
right,
forth.
right.
Although that's applicable to all AI models, but
Hmm.
since China is considered more like
Yeah,
adversary.
yeah. Actually, one of the things I've been curious from the beginning, I mean, these are basically, machine learning, sort of on steroids, right? I mean, so
Mm.
far, most AI is machine learning, which is based on data, scraping data. How do the Chinese AI companies or AI models um, deal with the fact that the Great Firewall of China? I mean, I assume, are not allowed full access to the global internet. Um, how do they handle that, or are they?
Well, I think the Great Firewall is for the government to block that like information they consider detrimental
Right.
or
Yeah.
dangerous
Right.
from citizens. Uh,
But not for
citizens.
corporations?
But I'm not sure like if that works also in this case that I think these companies is more like, for instance, the governments in the international community would protect the stealing of their own data because now increasingly that we have this data sovereignty scheme going on.
Hmm.
Previously, the Chinese government started it with this, like they want to say, okay, this is our sovereignty. Our sovereignty extends to cyberspace and also now extends to data. Everything has to be local, blah, blah. So and now it's increasingly the case. Uh, uh, European Union has adopted similar set of regulations. The US is also, you know, we'll see what's going on with TikTok. So we have become very, very protective of our own data. So it's not just China in terms of its censorship. I mean, but on the other hand, the censorship does play a role. The government does issue guidance like, okay, if there are some political taboos, some political concepts
Hmm.
that cannot be answered by chatbots and
Hmm.
in that
Right.
regard. So,
Right.
but not in terms of large scale block of data from
Uh-huh.
the reach of
Uh-huh.
from the company to access, because the Chinese government also banking on the advance in AI to boost its productivity across the board. So they do have to, like any other areas, previous areas, they have to balance the pros and cons, benefits and costs between economic development and political stability.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I assume that American companies or European companies that are in this field have looked at DeepSeek and figured out, how to adapt it or adopt it in their own ways to be more efficient in the amount of energy they use
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
computing
So
power. I mean, there
yeah,
must
they
be
even
sort of an arms
published
race
it.
going on
Yeah,
there, isn't there?
because it's open source, so that even, as I mentioned, they even published an article explaining, oh, look, this is how we did it. So
Hmm.
this kind of on Nature is featured on the cover of Nature of that issue. So I assume this approach would diffuse some like animosity. Like for instance, OpenAI technically is not banned from China. They themselves retreat from the Chinese market so that they can play the card that this is a national security issue. So that they can ask for more support from the government, from the US government. So you can see that these companies also play with these geopolitical tension. They sometimes even fire up the anxiety
Hmm.
on the basis of a national security so that uh, they can ask more resources from the government. Yeah.
So Dan Saltman has asked, what are countervailing forces in China to counter the state using AI to improve and expand surveillance and suppression of the general population, if any? Yeah,
That
so yeah. So what's keeping, the government from using, these powers to further enhance their control of the population?
right.
Or are there any
Uh,
forces?
right. How do we avoid being tracked
Hmm.
or
Yeah,
being
yeah.
like uh this is a like a very broad question uh because like frankly because right now in this area particular area is still very private sector driven, so
Hmm.
it's more a worry on the part of the government to put it under control.
Hmm.
There there may be concerns about how the government takes advantage of this to survey the population more efficiently, but right now at the current stage is still like okay, like what can we do with these AI products and so on and so forth. Like yeah, for instance, the smart city programs, a lot of Chinese cities adopt there to solve, like for instance, the traffic jams or like to maintain their infrastructure, like Internet of Things, like
Hmm.
smart manholes and all these projects. Of course, but they're more like uh, economically oriented, and then they're also doing this digital governance projects, making a big uh, government platform that supports data sharing across uh, departments, but to provide better services and so on and so forth. But also that also increase their ability to combine integrative data to monitor
Sure.
citizens in a sense.
Yeah. But
Um,
actually, there was at one point a concern of the Chinese government itself that uh, I hope you can't hear that siren going in the background, that a concern that these companies were gathering more information about the people than the government itself has. Um, this was in the financial services area earlier. Um, so yeah, I assume it's a double-edged sword. I think we're sort of running out of time, but I did want to ask. I mean, you make a very compelling argument about the resources that China is devoting to this. But those resources have often are misappropriated, as you know, in the chip industry, for instance, Tsinghua, chip semiconductor, billions of dollars wasted. Um, but also, it creates the potential for the involution of this industry as well. I mean, China's electric car industry is massive. It's selling cars all over the world, but it's losing billions and billions of dollars, which over time is not sustainable. So I just wondered if they have, if why you think the Chinese government's investments in this area are going to be more efficient and less prone
No,
to
they're
misuse.
not. They're
Oh,
not more efficient. That's why I mentioned that in terms of data centers, there are like too many of them,
right.
less utilized than is supposed to, and then it's not providing all the it's not used in their full capacities and so on and so forth. That's why the state trying to like consolidate them and banning on constructing new data centers. So they're trying to, take a coordinated uh, approach to building these data centers and upgrading them instead of these
Hmm.
repetitive overcapacity building at a less
Hmm.
efficient level. So they
Yeah.
always like that. Of course, as you said, that would also the intervention of bureaucracy would also create new set of questions.
Hmm.
So in other words, that and in terms of involution, that's not just AI sector, not AI in sector. It's the overall that leads to. I mean, it's rooted in this bigger structural issue that you pay too much attention on the supply side
Right.
without paying equally attention to the consumption side. So you create too many stuff, more stuff than people can consume. So of course
Right.
they're like there's no um so they're trying to find solutions, but it is long struggle, strength
Hmm.
struggle. But hopefully, if anything, the Chinese government is patient and is persistent or tenacious, whatever you say. Hopefully they will crawl out of this like
Well, maybe they can use AI to answer that question.
yeah, if AI doesn't hallucinate in
Yeah, yeah,
in this issue
exactly.
on this topic.
By
Yeah.
the way, just apologies for using the word
Oh, no, no,
involution, which
no.
is
That
no.
I
I'm
use
talking
the
to the
word.
audience,
Oh,
but I highly recommend that you Google involution. It's a very interesting phenomenon that's occurring in China right now. I'm afraid we're going to have to bring it to a close. If you want to learn more about this, I highly recommend that you read Dr. Yuan's paper, which Deanna will make available through the website or through the chat. And I hope that we can have you back in a year or so and find out what's happened in the meantime, because this is really one of the fastest moving developments in modern economic history.
I'll definitely
Um,
keep an eye on it. Yeah.
okay. All right.